Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We're about to get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Holliday. I'm the Director of Animal Care and Conservation at the Endangered Wolf Center. I would like to thank Tyson Research Center for allowing us to use their building and their space. It's beautiful. And I also wanted to thank Virgil and Sandra Von Treese for sponsoring the 2024 Speaker Series this year. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker tonight. After earning her master's in collaborative conservation from Colorado State University with a focus on raptor reintroductions in Bulgaria, Rosie worked for Montana Public Radio and NGOs focused on watersheds. Currently, she focuses on conflict prevention tool education and coordinating programs like the Bear Smart Community Resource Program. So join me in welcoming Rosie Costain, Program and Communications Coordinator at People and Carnivores.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, so much, and thanks to the Endangered Wolf Center for letting me come out here. I'm just really excited to be able to be here and talk to you all a little bit more about conflict prevention with wolves in the Northern Rockies. But to get started, I want to give a little bit of background on the organization that I work for. It's called People and Carnivores. We're a Montana-based nonprofit, and we work to conserve our whole phrase is protect, connect, and restore large carnivores throughout the Northern Rockies. We really focus on Montana and then also Idaho and Wyoming, but a lot of the work that we do can apply to the entire Rocky Mountain West as well. But yeah, we're a pretty small team. There are 4 of us pretty much, and we have 2 field managers who really do a lot of our core work, and that core work is that we put conflict prevention tools on the ground. So we really focus on working with people to make sure that wherever they're living, they're not coming into conflict with carnivores. And so we work with bears, grizzly bears, black bears, mountain lions, and gray wolves. Beyond that, in this talk, I'm just going to start by providing a little bit of context about what's going on with wolves in the Northern Rockies, highlight some of the tools and practices that we use, and then get a little bit more into how we really apply those tools, because that is kind of a more complex thing than just handing them off to people. So to start, this is just, again, as a little bit of background, obviously a map of Montana. This shows where wolves are throughout the state. So you can see they're mostly on this western half. Those darker blue areas are where there are higher densities of wolf packs, and all those little orange dots are the different known packs that exist. And then to give you a sense, if you were to zoom in on this map, so if you see like where that red circle is, that's right above Yellowstone National Park. This is kind of in the Paradise Valley. If you look off on the side there, you'll notice pretty much everything that's colorful is some sort of public land. And then everything that's tannish, brownish, that's mostly private land. So off on that left side, we kind of have like a very nice checkerboard. You could play a kind of a chaotic game of checkers or chess over there if you wanted to. So there's really this big mix of public and private land, and that really complicates kind of the work that we're doing in terms of there are lots of spaces for wolves and livestock, which is the main type of conflict that you see with these species, for them to interact. So, you're not able to just put up fences everywhere to keep these two things separated. You're dealing with like livestock grazing on public lands. So we have to kind of figure out how we're able to balance and work with people who are all across the landscape. For a little bit more context, a lot of wolf issues in Montana and in the Northern Rockies are driven by social intolerance. So that's mostly from livestock depredations. There's also some attitudes due to hunting and elk numbers and things, but I'm going to focus mostly on the livestock depredation part. So those, that social intolerance is kind of driven by those people who deal with wolves on a day-to-day. So that's usually ranchers. The ranchers and agricultural producers, as well as hunters, they have a huge say in the Northern Rockies on kind of what's going on with wolves. They have a lot of weight, their comments do, when they're talking to the legislature or they're talking to other stakeholders. People really put a lot of stock into what they say and how they're feeling and how they're doing. So when wolves are interacting with them and somehow affecting their livelihoods because wolves are killing cattle, killing sheep, it's a really big deal. And a lot of people then have kind of a negative feeling towards wolves, have this poor social tolerance toward them. So that's something that it's a really challenging context to work in, but we're always trying to build up that social tolerance. So as a little bit of background, our theory of change is basically, the issue is that wolves are moving around on the landscape. When they're moving around, they'll come across an unnatural food source or a human property, which is livestock. They see that as an easy meal, and when they have that easy meal, they are often killed in response. Or if they're not killed, they're collared, and then if it happens again, which is likely, then they're killed at that point. So we know that conflict prevention tools can stop this. It will keep livestock alive, which is wonderful. And in response, there's a higher social tolerance, so then wolves get to stay alive, get to stay moving along on the landscape. One other thing I wanted to share on that is, that's just, even though that's kind of like a nice simple path of just like running along from point to point, it is a little more complicated, so we have to use certain strategies, apply specific tactics, and that's something I'm going to get into a little bit more later, just of how we're able to connect with people, get some of these tools more on the ground. But to start, I want to talk about some of the tools that we do use. For preventing conflicts, there are kind of three main things you can do. You can either use tools that keep wolves away from attractants, and attractants are livestock or anything that draws a carnivore into an area, so livestock in this instance. So you can use tools to keep wolves away from those areas. You can remove the attractant entirely. That's a strategy we use more with bears, but there are a couple things you can do with wolves where it applies. And you can also, the big thing, which is like the big dream hope that's a lot more complicated and a lot more involved, is that you work with livestock owners to kind of change the way in which they're managing cattle and having them move around the landscape. But to start off, an easy basic one is trail cameras. These are great for monitoring a species, understand what's going on in an area. That way, before you go in and apply any other tools, you at least have a sense of what's there, who's moving around, so you can see if there's one wolf, a handful of wolves. It helps you kind of better figure out which tools you want to use in that area and apply. This is a trail camera video that we got up in down in southwest Montana, of an entire wolf pack going past a trail camera, which is like one of the coolest trail camera videos we've ever gotten. Usually it's just like an ear or something in a corner, and just wolf after wolf after wolf went by on this one.
And they kind of look like they're looking for their shirt, doesn't it?
Yeah. And so this is really handy because now we were able to know, okay, here's a whole pack in this area. Like, we can work a little bit more proactively with the ranches that are in this area, just to get some of these tools out and about. This is another great thing about trail cameras, is that when you're able to, once you've applied some tools and depredations are down, if you are able to capture videos of these carnivores still being in the area, and you can show those to the landowner, they are like super excited. Whereas before, if you were to show them a video and, it's showing bears and wolves and mountain lions, they're going to be terrified. They're going to be really angry and go, oh my God, we have to get them away. We have one landowner that we work with where, that was their initial reaction to first seeing all of these animals on trail cameras. After we applied tools, depredations went down, and they were thrilled to watch all of the trail camera videos that were coming off of their property afterwards, because all of the species were still there, but they just weren't doing anything that was troublesome. So another great one, this is just permanent electric fencing. You have to be a little specific about how you build it in order for a wolf to not be able to jump over it, go under it, go through it. So it has to be pretty high. You have to have, this is a netted fence around a sheep night pen. So nothing can go through, but if it weren't a netted fence, you would have to have about, I think, 7 to 9 wires, or 7 to 11 wires is about how many you want. I'm sure the EWC staff knows about how to keep wolves in a place or out of a place, but Yeah, so this is a big one that when we have the opportunity to do this, it's a really great tool. Electric fence is something that works really well for a lot of species. You do have to be mindful of the design, where you're going to place it and all that, but works really well. On the more temporary side, fladry is a big one you hear about a lot with wolves. Fladry is this red flagging hung on a line. We usually use something called turbo fladry, which means we add electricity to this system. So the line is electrified, and then a little bit of charge will go out into the flags too. But it's something you put up we usually use it during calving season. That's a time when cows are more vulnerable. Wolves are more likely to come into an area because there's a lot of stuff to prey on. So you can put this around the perimeter of a pasture, just has to be entirely enclosed. Wolves come and look at it. They go, oh my God, that's new. That's scary. I don't know what it is. And they will turn around and leave. And so this is a wolf approaching some fladry. You can see kind of in the corner, a little flag there. The next picture we have from this trail camera is an empty frame with wolf tracks going the other direction. So it's just something that, because it's a novel stimulus, they just don't want to interact with it, even though they could pretty easily go right through it if they wanted to. After about 60 days, they kind of figure out it's not doing anything, and they'll go under it and go through. So that is why it's great for times like calving season, because calving season is also about 60 days. So, and this is one, where you can combine it with other tools, and that really makes it more effective as well. And I'll talk about some of those too. Let's see, scare devices are a great one. There are a lot of types of scare devices. These are another temporary tool, so you only want to use it for like a few weeks at a time. But this one right here is a fox light, another big one we use. We use a lot of radios, a lot of different types of flashing lights, but fox lights are flashing lights. They flash really randomly, which is great because the more random, the longer it works. It's more effective for a longer period of time. I think this one has a video on it too, but it'll show you kind of what fox lights look like when they're set up around a pasture. So there's this one right in front that you'll see flash, and then you'll see some random flashes of light in the background in just a second, just little pin pricks all around. So this is in a cow pasture, just on the different fence posts in that pasture, we've got a bunch of lights set up. And you can use one, but the ideal is to have a bunch like this. And it's, in theory, supposed to look like, and the reason they were made in this way is that it looks like a person walking around with a flashlight at night. So it just gives off this impression of human presence, same as like a radio might. You usually turn it to talk radio if we're going to use those. And it's just, humans are in the area. You don't want to come near here. And it works for a few weeks at a time. So it works even more if you're able to kind of mix it up further. So move lights around, move alarms around. But yeah, that's one that's a really good one, especially if you're responding to a conflict too. If something has just happened, you can go out and throw up a couple of lights really quick as a way to make sure nobody comes back the next night or the next day. Next one up is livestock guardian dogs. We have the most pictures of these because this is the only thing that we're actually good at taking pictures of because everybody loves dogs. But yeah, we use, there are a lot of different types of guard animals, but we work specifically with dogs. They are really effective in protecting livestock. They're not your average domestic dog. We're using certain breeds, and we're also making sure that there's a specific process that they bond to the livestock. So in this bottom corner, we've got a bonding pen set up. So when they're puppies, you want to make sure that they have a chance to get to know the livestock they're supposed to be protecting, and the livestock have a chance to get to know them so they know we don't need to be nervous of those dogs. So a setup like this gives everybody a chance to get used to everybody's scent, get used to seeing everybody, and then eventually you can kind of introduce them and, kind of monitor and make sure that everybody's getting along before they end up getting sent out into the pastures, wherever they're going to be all together. Bunch of different breeds do different jobs, or they kind of have different tendencies that they like to stick to. So certain dogs are called sticky dogs. They like to be with the herd at all times, and they'll hang out with the herd. Like Great Pyrenees are really good at this. They'll bark at things from, just while they're hanging out inside a herd or a flock. And then other dogs like Anatolian Shepherds, they like to hang out on the perimeter a little bit more. They'll go around the area, scare off anything that they might find. Other dogs are a little more aggressive, so if they were to come in contact with a carnivore, they might be able to fight it off a little bit more. Another key with these is that you want to make sure that you always have a pack, because if you're just sending out a lone dog, they're more likely to get into trouble. If you've got a few of them, everybody can kind of stick together, or in some cases, some can go one way, others can go another way. They can do different jobs. But if they do run into any carnivores, they're able to better protect themselves and better protect the livestock. Oh, let's see. We've got, I did write these down because I always get them wrong. Those are the white ones with black noses are a cross of a Turkish Kangal and a Boz Shepherd. And then I think these ones down here are Anatolian Shepherd mixes. So those are the ones that we have a breeder that we work with pretty regularly, and those are the two main kinds that he breeds. But they do a great job. Yeah, oh my gosh, they're huge. If you don't think I have a photo for size context, but they're like up to your hip, or at least my hip. And another cool project that we've been able to do with these is as kind of a more experimental. It started as a bit of an experiment, but we've started putting GPS collars on dogs. That way, landowners can better track their movements, which gives them, it's a little bit more of a teamwork effort that way. So they can see if the dogs are doing any unusual behavior. If the dogs are hanging out in one area for a long period of time, that might indicate that some livestock have wandered off and they're sticking with them. Or if they run off into a direction that they might not normally go, that means they might be chasing something off. So it's a good time for the landowner to run out and check and make sure that everybody's okay. And we've also started integrating that with range riders as well. So the GPS collars that we use, they need internet. So we have started handing these guys who are out on horseback with a herd or a flock, we give them Starlink, because you can take Starlink anywhere and get phone service and get internet service. So you can track on your phone and see where the dogs are, what they're doing. And that way you're again, you have a little bit better sense of everything that's going on in the area. This gets at if you can't, or, the other ones are kind of keep wolves away from an attractant. This is one of the few that's remove the attractant that works for wolves, and it's carcass composting, or just carcass management. So when a cow or a sheep dies, if the carcass is on the property, if it's near the other animals, it's going to draw in more predators and carnivores. If you're able to remove it, that is better for everyone's safety because it's not drawing things in. So we have been able to partner with a lot of watershed groups. Here's a whole chunk of a bunch of partners we worked with this composting site on. But we're able to partner with watershed groups and others to build these composting facilities. It means that when the carcasses arrive, they can break down a little bit faster. So, more efficient process, but also they're set up in a spot where they usually have an electric fence around them. So other things aren't coming in to feed on this one area where there are a ton of carcasses. And we're also able to, through those partnerships, set up usually like a free pickup system. That way a rancher doesn't have the burden of saying, okay, instead of being able to drag this into the bushes nearby, like someone will come and pick it up and take it far, far away. So it's not going to be an issue at all. And those free pickup programs are like a really critical way in which you get people to buy into this type of a program and get them on board with it. This final one is more on that third point of how you manage cattle and moving them around in different ways. There are a lot of different kind of tactics or methods around range riding, but the ones that for like range riding to be a really effective tool, you need to have the person who is riding around on their horse staying with the herd at all times. So like these guys, you need to make sure that those range riders are keeping the herd or flock, whatever livestock they're with, keeping them really close together. If there are stragglers, it's a little easier for them to be picked off, and that also imitates a more natural grazing style a little bit more anyway when those animals are kind of kept closer together. And it also keeps them moving along a little faster instead of just hanging out in one spot forever and ever. You want to make sure that you're herding your cattle or sheep out of dangerous areas. So sometimes we've seen, there'll be a wolf den nearby. The cows don't know that. They're like, oh, what a beautiful field. Let's hang out. If they're with range riders, one of the things they're doing is they're out monitoring the area around the cows, looking for wildlife sign. So like if they're seeing tracks, if they're seeing, scratch marks from like a bear or anything else, or if they're seeing animal dens, they can go, we need to either move out of this area or use a lot more vigilance in this area. So this is another one where it's really handy to have other tools. Like if there's an instance where there are wolves in the area, you can then have some fox lights with you, put those out around overnight when you're gonna have your cows all congregated together. And that will just, again, be another thing that is more likely to keep wolves away from that area. As I've kind of mentioned throughout this, none of these tools are a catch-all. It's really great when you can combine all of them or a number of them. So this is a graphic just showing what a ranch property could look like if you are using a lot of these different tools. Let's see, you've got, over here you've got your riders and your herders keeping everybody together. You've got a carcass management guy coming to take a carcass far, far away. You've got your livestock guardian dogs, your fladry around a vulnerable herd that's got some calves in it. So there are just a lot of ways where if you combine all of these, they become a little bit more effective. And with that also, there is, if you're looking at this graphic, that's a lot of work to do all of that. It's not practical to think that you can just hand someone all of these tools or give them a bunch of fence posts and an electric fence energizer and say, have at it. Good luck. Hopefully all of your depredations are taken care of at this point. You really do have to work with a person a little bit more than that to make sure that they're going to be on board and that the tool is going to be used effectively so that it is actually preventing depredations. I want to go back to, I mentioned our theory of change a little bit earlier, and I want to just briefly mention that again. So you've got wolves, they encounter an unnatural food source, take the easy meal, end up getting killed. If you're able to put conflict prevention tools and practices in place, it keeps livestock safe, and then social tolerance increases towards wolves because cows are staying alive. Therefore, wolves stay alive and they keep moving. That's just, so in the sense of conflict prevention tools, they are kind of like the sticking point for, okay, this is how we make all of this happen. But getting those tools on the ground is pretty tricky. This work is not possible without effectively and collaboratively working with people. So in more rural, traditional areas, people generally don't want to use these tools. They need to be convinced. They're costly. They are time-consuming to put in place. You can see a guy over here unraveling fladry. That's something you have to put out every year and pick up every year. In the course of a couple of months on top of calving season, which is taking up all your time and you're exhausted because you're up in the middle of the night with a bunch of cows. So it's something where you really have to work with people to go, this is something that is going to benefit you. So we used a community-based approach in our work to do this. And that means that we, for one, know and live in the communities where we're working. It allows us to authentically look, act, talk like members of rural communities. And it's because we are members of rural communities. Again, I mentioned our 2 field managers earlier. They are the ones who are really, out. They are living in communities. One is up in Northwest Montana. One is in Southwest Montana. They are constantly at community events. They are always talking with people in their communities and surrounding towns to them. They can't be everywhere at once. So when they're working in a town that's maybe a neighboring town, not somewhere that they actually live, they do as much research as they possibly can. And ahead of time, they're also looking for ways that they can get more involved in that community. Since you're in a community, since you're living there, since you know it a little more, there's a little bit more, it shows that you have buy-in, that you care about that place, that, you kind of understand some of the values that are in that community, and you share some of those values probably. You care a little bit more about the outcome. So when we're approaching people to talk to them, we're approaching conversations from a local perspective. And we're showing that we care about kind of maintaining livelihoods that are traditional livelihoods that are in that area. And we do a lot of research if we don't know the area, just to make sure that we're not coming in with, misconstrued ideas of what's going on or how people feel. We also, one other big point on this is that when we're starting conversations, we're doing a lot of asking questions. We are not having a lot of, here's how we solve all your problems, just put up flattery. That, you're going to instead go, what are the problems you're facing? What are some of your main worries with this? What are some of the complications to this? We know you're not using this. Can you tell us a little bit more of why you don't want to, or what the issue is there, or help us understand where you're coming from? And when we have initial conversations, that's really what they are. We're not doing any talking. The only talking we're doing is question asking. Another thing we do in this community-based approach is that we maintain deliberate communication. So a bit of that is, like I just mentioned, with that asking a lot of questions. It's also doing a lot of figuring out what shared desires are. So, normally, our main desire as people in carnivores is that carnivores are alive, they're doing well, their populations are thriving. That is not what a rancher cares about. They want to make sure that they are protecting their livelihood, that their cows are staying safe. The common thread to both of those is that you need cows or sheep or other livestock to stay alive. So that is where we meet people, is we find those common threads and, find more specific ones as well of where can we connect as people to strengthen this relationship, but also how can we connect over this shared desire of ours to keep livestock safe. We're also really targeted in our messaging. So we talk to ranchers different than we might talk to our donors, where with our donors, that's where we get to geek out about how much we love wolves or how much we love bears. We're not going to do that at all with a rancher. We're more focused on, okay, again, let's get to the technical side of things, or let's get to know each other. And we also do, I talked about this a bit earlier with some of the EWC staff, but in terms of policy, there are a lot of policies popping up in state legislatures about carnivores. They're usually pretty negative. We don't do a huge amount of advocacy work, which is one of the reasons that ranchers are willing to work with us, is that we don't do that advocacy work, or we don't do it very publicly. So as opposed to some other organizations where they go, nope, you are actively fighting against me and my lifestyle, I don't want to work with you, you're willing to work with us. So when we do comment on, different bits of policy that have popped up, we kind of we either keep it quiet and we're not going to bring it up in a conversation with a rancher, or if it's a public situation where we're going and providing comments in person, our comments are pretty moderate and they're pretty much always the same thing. So you just change out what the bill name is every time you submit them, but it's basically, we need to put more effort and more resources into using conflict prevention. And here's how you can do that specifically for, if it's a bill on wolves, we'll talk about all of the different tools that work there, talk about resources available, how it's possible to grow conflict prevention tools and practices, and offer our support for doing that. When we have done that in the past, it's pretty encouraging in terms of, in a legislative session, you'll see everybody gives their comment. Afterwards, the legislators start having a little bit of discussion over the bill, and usually our comments are ones that they refer back to throughout the conversation, because, they'll go back and ask a couple people who commented, like, well, you're a rancher, you said you support this bill that allows, more lethal control or more hunting or whatever else. And is there anything you can do to protect your cows in other ways? And they go, well, and they will reference our comments and they'll go, actually, yeah, there's that stuff that they mentioned. You can do some of that. And it's like, great. Like, let's get your phone number real quick so we can connect with you and maybe get some of them on your ranch later. But yeah, so that's a great opportunity where we don't get hugely involved in policy, but when we do, we try and be moderate, but also kind of stick to that, do want to speak up, but stick to what we know, which is conflict prevention works. Another thing we do in this community-based approach is that we are technical experts and we maintain that technical expertise. We get a lot of calls from like state agencies, state wildlife management agencies, and from ranchers saying, can you tell us more about this stuff? Even though it's stuff that they use on a day-to-day basis, we have a lot of little tips and tricks or an understanding for how it works to make sure that when it is put on the ground, it's being effective. So things like with electric fence, if you're going to build an electric fence, you can't just build it, whatever way. Like I mentioned, you have to have a specific design. Knowing what that design is and taking into consideration certain factors on that land, like on that property, is really important. Same with like fladry. Something we've been able to do there is because we work with it a lot, we've figured out little tips and tricks that really help you install it because it is a time-consuming thing. So you can see like this guy is using it's wrapped up on a spool. There's another one down there. That saves you so much time. Fladry's kind of like Christmas lights. If you don't put it away properly, it gets super tangled up and you are spending so much time on like untangling it. So if you spool it up on a spooler like this, that will save you hours for the next season and like literally a whole day of just unwinding and untangling fladry. So we have been able to build, create a design to share with people of here's how you build a spooler to put on the back of your truck or attach to the back of your ATV so that you can really speed up this process and it makes you more willing and likely to use this tool. Another one is like when you're putting up fladry, you have to put in little posts to hang the fladry on. Figured out if you use a golf bag to carry all your posts instead of having to plop them on the ground, gather them all up, move a few, 100 yards down the way. If you have them in a golf bag, you can just go pick one out, tap, 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 move on, pick one out, tap, tap, tap. So it really speeds up the process, and it's something that encourages ranchers to, if they have information like that or they have someone willing to show them some of those tips, they're way more likely to continue using that tool in the future. And especially since once these conflict prevention tools are in place, they often see that depredations do go down, so they want to continue using them in the future. And a final thing that we do is that we seek out good partners. So that includes working with like agencies and other folks who have a good authority, are good authority figures in a community, but also if we can find ranchers. So this is a family up there and down here that we work with a lot. They own a sheep ranch in southwest Montana. They are fantastic partners. They started out with, just needing help building a couple of things on their property to prevent a lot of conflicts they were seeing with all sorts of species. They have a lot of bears there, a lot of wolves there. And over time, we've grown this relationship, and now we're able to do all sorts of projects on their property, which is awesome. But they also will bring their neighbors to their property and show off some of the tools that we've put in place to be like, this worked for us. Do you want to come look at it? Maybe you can do it too. So, finding those types of people is just awesome. And a lot of that comes from that building those strong relationships so that you have a lot of trust, you've built up your credibility, and that people are willing to share about what they've learned from you. And yeah, like I have been talking about, all of those things just kind of grow participation. It encourages people to be more likely to use those conflict prevention tools. With that, happy to take any questions that you guys might have.